Last time we had seen about this, cavity preparation for inlays. We had started with the inlays preparation. So, what are the principles of the cavity design? Today we are seeing for the cavity preparation for the class 2 inlay, as well as what are the principles. The principles are same as of for the amalgam cavity. It's like outline form, resistance and retention form, removal of the remain caries cavity, convenience form, finishing of the enamel walls, cleaning and critical appraisal of the cavity. This is the cleaning of the toilet of the cavity. The principles are same, only there are some differences in the cavity preparation for both. So, what is the outline form? It is the possible outline where you are making your cavity. So, there are two types of the outline form. One is the external and another one is the internal. So, there are certain principles which are followed for the external outline form. They are like whatever the outline form you give to the cavity. You see, this is the outline form. You are given the shape to the cavity, possible shape of the cavity. So, in that, what are the things should be in your mind? This it should be in the straight line. There should be always smooth curves, and any sharp line angles are there. Either they should be included or completely excluded. So this is the basic principle for the external outline form. So whatever the finish lines you are making for the occlusal or proximal surface, they should be including or excluding the faulty and carious tooth structure. If you are including, if there is a caries are there, in that time you have to decide about your outline form. Is either you should be involve them. If you are involving, if that extension is very high, then that time you have to see that how much cusp has been damaged. If the most of the cusp is damaged for the caries, then that time you have to decide about the capping of that cusp. So that is the outline form should be kept in on your mind. So whatever the enamel is there, undermine enamel is there, which is below the caries, is the basic principle of any cavity preparation, whether it is amalgam or inlay or composite. Every time, this is the basic thing that caries should be removed completely. If any enamel is undermined by the caries, if there is a intact enamel is there and below that the caries are there, that time the basic principle will be you have to remove the caries and this unsupported enamel has to be removed. That should be included in the cavity. So that is deciding your external, whatever the outline form is there, that is getting decided. That is called as the external outline form. Once you had removed the caries, then depth of the cavity is also the important factor. So in this, everywhere the dentino-enamel junction, it must be intact and supported by the dentin. Is wherever your cavity is, you are making, wherever you are making your base of the cavity, there should be relative dentin thickness has to be there. So that the impact of the forces which we are coming on the restoration should be, dentin should be able to take them. So your DEJ should be always into the supported by the dentin. Then next thing, it is the cervical cavo surface margins. Is the whatever the caries are there, if they are either at the supragingival, subgingival, or at the contact level, at the gingival level. So the design will be decided, the outline form will be decided according to the spread of that caries that time. The gingival position is very important because we have to conserve the maximum gingival position so that we can come to the self-cleansing area. So the cervical cavo surface margins, they should be as conservative as gingival position as possible. So that either it should be polished well and brought it to the self-cleansing area. This will be decided when you are deciding about the external outline form. Then in maxillary molars and mandibular bicuspid, because that is having the oblique ridge. You know, maxillary molar has the oblique ridge, mandibular bicuspid, they are having the oblique and transverse ridge. So if they are not involved, if they are unaffected by the caries, you should keep that oblique ridge. You should not involve that unnecessarily because that gives the strength of the tooth. So once now you had decided about your external outline form, so you had decided what type of cavity you are going to prepare. Then next comes as internal outline form, means when you prepare the cavity, how it should be. That also should be in your mind when you start the cavity. So in this internal outline form, the most important thing for the inlay is a taper. The difference in the outline form, internal outline form for the amalgam and inlay should be like that. So that what will happen, the taper should be visible with the eyes. The, for the inlay preparation, because there's a path of insertion and path of removal should be the easy. So in this internal outline form, what are the principles you have to follow are your purple floor and axial wall, they should be in the dentine. As we know that in the DEJ should be also in the supported with the dentine, this relative dentine thickness, it is very important thing. And so that there should be enough dentine to protect the pulp. So whatever the dentine is there, if there is a cavity is going deeper, if the your dentine is insufficient, then you have to give the cement base. Is either you are giving calcium hydroxide or whatever the cement GIC, whatever cement you give to decide the depth of the cavity. There should be sufficient distance between the restoration and pulp so that you can protect your pulp. So whenever there is a insufficient dentine, cement base is mandatory. And whatever the amount of taper you are giving, as last time we had already discussed, whenever the depth is more, taper is more. Whenever the cavity is shallow, your taper will be less. This length of preparation is directly proportional to the depth of the cavity. So you know about now this internal outline form, your everything is decided with the dentinal thickness. Then next come as a, because next come as a cervical floor. Whatever the cervical floor also should be in the sound tooth structure. Whatever the caries are there has to be removed, and that should be flat to hold it. So the cervical floor should be always, cervical floor should be always in the sound dentinal tissue. And whatever the line angles you are taking, whether that is in the occlusal or proximal surfaces, they should be well defined. This, once you see the cavity, your line angles and point angles and whatever the occlusal or proximal surfaces you are preparing, they should be defined. They should be seen as a box. So the axiopulpal line angle should be rounded. The junction of the axial wall and pulpal floor, where at the just at the level of this, that should be rounded. That means it will have the slight bevel or rounded, so that the distribution of the forces and it will not get fractured. So the integrity of this mesial and distal marginal ridge has to be maintained in this whole everything, because whatever the tooth structure is there, strongest tooth structure is there, that you should try to maintain that. Like the oblique ridge, even the marginal ridges, you should try to maintain them, whether it is a mesial or distal. And if there are any features which are terminating at the marginal ridges, you should include them. Otherwise, what will happen? Those features, they will be acting for the secondary caries formation. So this is about the internal line angle and this internal outline form. So we had, now you know about the outline form. Is it clear? So now we will be talking about the resistance and retention form. So by this time, I hope you know the resistance form, what is the definition of resistance form, what is the retention form. Here we are going to talk combinedly. So what is the resistance form? This is the force which is avoiding the dislodgement. It is against the occlusion force, and the dislodgement of the restoration is avoided. And what is the retention form? That restoration is withstanding the masticatory forces. It is so simple. So the definition of the resistance form, the quality of the cavity should be such that the restoration will withstand stresses without being dislodged. This is, it is without being dislodged, means the restoration is placed at the place. It will not come out. And what is the retention? Which will withhold the masticatory forces. It is the quality of the cavity to be such that the restoration will be firmly held in the place under the masticatory forces. This definition is given by G.V. Black. So what are the features you are giving for the resistance and retention form? So you see, if you see this diagram, you will understand. If your resistance form and if your stress bearing areas are not proper, then there will be the fracture of the tooth. To avoid that, what we have to do that, we have to consider these occlusal forces properly. So that should not, the occlusal forces should be distributed. That feature, whatever you give, that is for the resistance form. So compression and tension, both the forces should be able to withstand. So the main feature which we are giving in the inlays is a taper. Because if you see this is the tooth. Whatever the cavity you prepare, the inlay, whatever you fabricate, should fix in that area. So whatever the cavity you are preparing, the principle is same. If you are making the cavity, your inlay should be able to go and fix in that area. Exactly, it should fit in that area. So you have to give the proper taper, so that the taper should be, because last time we read the taper should be in between 2 to 8 degree. It depends on the depth of the cavity. If it is a longer cavity, longer taper. If it is a shorter cavity, shallow cavity, then the smaller taper. So correct taper will provide the proper resistance and retention. So it should not be so means the taper should not be so more. If the shallow cavity is there and if you are giving the 8% taper, that time definitely your restoration is going to dislodge and it is going to displace, because there will be no frictional grasp between the restoration and tooth. Is it clear? The, the frictional grasp means there is no attachment between the restoration and tooth structure. Is there proper adaptation should be there. So this will give the allow the proper setting of the restoration in the cavity. So first important point is the correct taper. Then next what we learn is whatever your cervical floor or pulpal floor. This cervical floor and pulpal floor both should be perpendicular to the line of the force. Is the whatever the long axis of the tooth is there, that will be the line of the force. So that should be perpendicular to the line of the force. Is your pulpal as well as the cervical floor should be designed perpendicular to the line of the force. And the line angles and point angles has to be well defined. This is the third point. Then axiopulpal line angle has to be rounded. If you are giving the slice, because learned about the we had learned about this slice and auxiliary slice. What is slice preparation? What is auxiliary slice? We had already know now. Those are the additional features which we are given for the that will give the circumferential tie to hold the restoration. That is the slice and auxiliary slice preparation, as well as the dovetail. It is the same what was for the amalgam. Dovetail is the major factor for the retention and resistance. In case if you need any additional, then pin restoration or any prosthesis given at the cervical floor will be the additional retention which is given for the inlays. Then the most important hand instrument, what we talked about last time also, that is a gingival marginal trimmer. This gingival marginal trimmer, it is used to provide a V-shaped groove at the junction of the axial wall and gingival floor of the box. You are using your gingival marginal trimmer. You know the use of the gingival marginal trimmer. It should start from the center of the tooth, right to left and left to right. It is at the you are going buccally as well as lingually from the center of this tooth. So that is the gingival use of the gingival marginal trimmer, and the groove which is this V-shaped groove, what is formed at the junction of the axial wall and gingival floor, that is called as the Minnesota ditch. In Viva, if anyone asks you what is the Minnesota ditch, you should be able to tell about that. That is the groove, V-shaped groove prepared by the gingival marginal trimmer at the junction of the axial wall and gingival floor at the box. And that will enhance the resistance form. And the more important thing, as we discussed, that whatever the caries dentin is there, that has to be removed. Because if there is any undermined caries is there, that has to be removed and, to be either to be replaced with the cement, or it should be given as a base, calcium hydroxide or cement, depending on the direct or indirect capping. So once that is, you have removed your caries, then in spite of all these rules, the convenience of handling, convenience of accessibility and visibility is important. So in that convenience form, you can modify your extension, flare, taper and division. So sometimes if required is 0.0, 0.2, you can just vary it in your measurements. So that is the convenience form. Once you had made with your cavity, once the cavity is ready, so you have to finish the enamel wall and margin. So this enamel wall and margins, that will be done with the diamond instrument, big check diamond instrument, and the casting, it is because marginal fit, it is depend on your finishing only. Here you are giving your bevelings, you are giving your things, here you are the margins. We had seen in the detailing about this bevel giving last lecture. So once that is done, the finishing of the cavity, and that is done with the sandpaper disc or fluted finishing burrs. Then after that, the cleaning of the cavity is important, because it should be clean enough, the debris should not be there, because as you are taking the indirect pattern of this, either you are taking impression or you are taking the direct pattern. So you have to clean your cavity, dry with cotton and air. And once your cavity is prepared, you have to check and you have to evaluate your cavity taper with this line of draw and line of insertion. You have to check it either with the impression compound. You should make the impression compound soften, put it into your cavity, remove and see if there are any undercuts. Even the GP sticks are used to evaluate them. And what you will be evaluating after taking that impression compound or GP stick, you will check the taper, you will see is there any undercut, what is the line of draw, and whether the bevels and line angles are defined or not. Finish lines and bevels are very important because they will be covering your restoration. The flushing of the restoration will be there with the cavity. So that is also important. So once you know the principles of the general principles of the cavity preparation, you should know the biomechanical preparation for this inlay. In this, the preservation of the tooth structure, retention and resistance form, structural disability, marginal integrity, and preservation of the periodontium, these factors are considered because this restoration is fabricated outside and restored at the place. So preservation of the tooth structure, we should avoid the maximum destruction, excessive tooth removal to be avoided. The reinforcement of the tooth structure is very important. If the half of the cusp is involved, then you have to take that into the cavity. So in the retention and resistance form, you know what is the structural durability, whatever the restoration is there, whatever the bulk of the restorative material should be there, so that it will withstand your masticatory forceps, as well as it will replace the tooth structure sufficiently. If it is very small, then that will not also suffice your purpose. But if it is a very big, then in that circumferential ties and bevels, so that will accommodate the normal contours of the tooth structure. So structural, isn't that what are the factors important? What are you giving for the structural stability? Is a gingival bevel, that is a marginal integrity, a proximal box preparation. Yesterday we spoke about the proximal box that will give you the retention and resistance form. Then proximal flares, secondary and primary flares, whatever you are giving. Then isthmus width is very important. It is same as for the amalgam, 1/3 or one-fourth of the intercuscal distance. But if required, we have to flare up to include the caries destruction. And Doughtail, it is again the resistance and retention as well as structural disability and occlusal behaviors, which will give the marginal integrity. All these factors will avoid the secondary caries formation and adaptability of the restoration. So this was all about the cavity preparation for the inlay. Any doubt? Is it clear? I'm just showing you the pictures of this class 2 inlay preparation. Because just see, go through this, the tooth preparation for the class 2 inlay. So in this you have to do the initial preparation of the final preparation. You have done your inlay cavity preparation in the pre-clinics also, so you have an idea. So in this initial preparation, what are you doing? You are preparing occlusal box, you are preparing the proximal box, and in the final preparation, you are removing the infected dentin, this carious portion. You are giving the bevel and flames. So 271 burr, which is usually used to make the pit, and then it is extended. The initial depth you are taking 1.5 and then extending on the long axis to the parallel to the tooth structure. If it is a mandibular or mandibular premolars, if you see this, as the they will have the inclination, lingually tilted tooth will be there. So whatever the structure you are making, whatever the cavities you are making, that will be perpendicular to the long axis of the tooth. Then you are extending the cavity, you are including the marginal ridges, you are making the involvement of the mandibular ridges, then you will involve all the facial lingual features, and at the place of the dowtail, retention form, that is very important for the resistance and retention form. Then occlusal step, how to make the ditch. In that preparation, you see, this proximal surface should be cleared with 0.2 to 0.5 millimeter here. Sorry. Here it is given as a 0.2 to 0.5 mm should be there. So in this, what you are doing, you are making two ditches, one at the facial and one at the lingual, the proximal ditches, and then with the hand instrument you are breaking them, either with the spoon excavator or with the hatchet. Then in this, usually to use the gingival marginal trimmer or to use the chisel or hatchet, you have to use the modified palm grip, and gingival wall should be plain with the scraping motion. You see, I was talking about the relative dentin thickness. At least it should be more